The searchlight from the Japanese destroyer tore through the darkness, a blinding finger of death sweeping menacingly across the ink-black water. It missed our bow by mere feet, its brilliant beam cutting a path of pure terror. In that agonizing moment, every breath caught in our throats, our engines choked to a barely audible idle, as we drifted, ghost-like, in the inky shroud off Vela La Vela. 23 American sailors, young and old, pressed themselves flat against the damp deck of PT-164, desperate to become one with the shadows, to simply disappear. Behind that behemoth of steel, 3 Japanese transports silently cut through the water. Their cavernous cargo holds brimming with nearly 8,000 enemy soldiers. Unaware, unsuspecting, they sailed closer to a destiny forged in the churning black waters of the Solomon Sea. Their journey to reinforce the strategic stronghold of Kolombangara was about to be violently, irrevocably concluded. The date was July 19, 1943, and in precisely 4 minutes, we would unleash a storm of hell from the depths of that very darkness they thought belonged to them. My hands, slick with sweat and anticipation, gripped the twin .50 caliber mount so tightly that my knuckles screamed in protest. Beside me, Ensign Robert Dutch Vanderberg, our executive officer, murmured coordinates to our skipper, Lieutenant Commander Arthur M. McPhersonson. The only light daring to challenge the oppressive gloom was the faint, phosphorescent green glow of our compass, a tiny beacon in a world plunged into war. Hidden in the moon's vast, obscuring shadow, cast by Vela La Vela's volcanic peaks, PT-168 and PT-171 waited, poised like coiled springs for our silent signal. We were America's secret weapon, and the Imperial Japanese Navy, masters of night warfare, were about to discover, in the most brutal way imaginable, that darkness was no longer their ally. My name is Chief Petty Officer Thomas Tom Harrigan, United States Navy Reserve. I was one of those ordinary men thrust into an extraordinary role, one of the first to truly prove that small wooden boats, often dismissed as mere toys, could bring down steel warships, could fundamentally alter the course of a colossal global conflict. People often ask me about those days, about what it felt like to be part of the most closely guarded naval secret of 1943, and the truth, unvarnished and stark, is that we were far too busy fighting for our lives, too consumed by the primal struggle for survival to truly grasp the monumental history we were, quite literally, making. We only knew one undeniable, visceral fact. If we failed tonight, those 8,000 Japanese soldiers, seasoned and ruthless, would reach Kolombangara, and there they would inflict unspeakable slaughter upon the American boys, many of them barely out of high school, desperately trying to take that strategic airfield. Every single torpedo we carried represented not just a potential explosion, but hundreds of American lives that might be saved. Every enemy transport we sent churning to the bottom of the sea meant parents back home who would be spared that dreaded, life-shattering telegram from the War Department, a stark symbol of profound loss. To truly comprehend how 3 boats, each smaller than most private yachts, could dare to challenge the mighty Imperial Japanese Navy at the absolute zenith of its power, you first need to immerse yourself in the brutal, unforgiving reality of what we were up against in the sweltering, humid summer of 1943. The Japanese, with a chilling efficiency born of years of dedicated practice and an almost mystical understanding of the maritime environment, had transformed night fighting into a terrifying, devastating art form. Since their stunning, decisive victory at Savo Island the previous August, a crushing defeat where they sank 4 Allied cruisers without suffering a single loss of their own ships, they had undeniably, unchallengeably, owned the darkness in the Solomon Islands. Their sailors, meticulously trained for years in the intricate, shadowy dance of night combat, had learned to fight with a precision that bordered on preternatural. They operated without the aid of sophisticated radar, relying instead on their almost unbelievably keen eyesight, their highly refined auditory senses, and an ingrained, practiced coordination that allowed them to move and strike as a single, deadly organism. They called their nocturnal supply runs, these shadowy arteries of reinforcement and logistics, the Tokyo Express. To us, in the more cynical, grim lexicon of desperate combat, they were simply the Rat Run. But, by any name, they moved troops and vital supplies with near absolute impunity, once the relentless tropical sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with fleeting, blood-red hues before plunging the world into an oppressive, dangerous blackness. The American Navy, despite its considerable advantages, larger ships, increasingly advanced radar systems, and superior overall firepower, was unequivocally losing the night war. Our admirals, steeped in the venerable, time-honored traditions of the battle line tactics honed in engagements like Jutland and Manila Bay, found themselves tragically unable to adapt with sufficient speed and flexibility to this terrifyingly new, fluid kind of warfare. Our cruisers and destroyers, magnificent vessels designed for grand fleet actions in the vast, open expanses of the ocean, were transformed into slow-moving, vulnerable targets, veritable sitting ducks in the confined, treacherous, reef-strewn waters of the Solomons. We needed something entirely different, something truly unexpected, something the Japanese would never in their wildest dreams anticipate. That something was already taking shape, being meticulously built in secret boatyards scattered across the American coastline, from the humid bayous of New Orleans to the bustling shipyards of New York. And it was destined, in a way few could have foreseen, to revolutionize naval warfare forever. The PT boat, the patrol torpedo boat, was born from this crucible of desperation, a testament to raw American ingenuity and an unyielding will to fight and win. At a sleek 80 feet long and a surprisingly nimble 20 feet wide, these boats were not, as was the convention of the age, constructed from steel. Instead, they were fashioned from laminated mahogany plywood, a seemingly fragile material in a war dominated by hardened armor and massive caliber guns. But this choice of material was not a weakness. It was a deliberate, calculated strength, allowing for a lightweight, incredibly fast hull. Powering these wooden marvels were 3 Packard 5M 2500 W12 engines, modified versions of the legendary Liberty aircraft engine, each capable of unleashing 1,200 horsepower. These monstrous engines propelled the PT boats to blistering speeds exceeding 45 knots, a velocity faster than any conventional torpedo of the era, and certainly faster than any warship the Japanese could field. This unparalleled speed wasn't just impressive, it was a tactical game-changer, our primary defense and our most potent weapon. Our offensive punch was equally formidable for a vessel of its size. We carried 4 21-inch torpedo tubes loaded with the formidable Mark 13 torpedoes. For close-in defense and to suppress enemy gun crews, we mounted a 20mm Oerlikon cannon, a rapid-firing anti-aircraft gun that proved deadly against surface targets, and 4 50-caliber machine guns, arranged for maximum coverage. We carried enough ammunition to raise hell for about 15 minutes of sustained, furious combat. After that intense burst of concentrated firepower, the unspoken rule was brutally simple. We'd better be heading home, or grimly heading to the bottom of the sea. There was no middle ground, no sustained slugging match for these fragile wooden warriors. My first encounter with a PT boat occurred in February 1943 at the Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron's rigorous training center in Melville, Rhode Island. I was a destroyer sailor, fresh from the relentless, soul-numbing convoy duty in the frigid North Atlantic, when the Navy, with an almost casual audacity, put out a call for volunteers. The request was vague, simply hazardous duty with experimental vessels. The recruiter, a man whose eyes held a flicker of something unsettling, wouldn't reveal what these mysterious vessels were. He only offered a chilling, stark statistic. The casualty rate was expected to be over 50%. Out of 200 eager, perhaps naive, volunteers, they selected just 40. I made the cut, not because of any inherent bravery I possessed, but due to a practical skill set honed in my youth. I could navigate by the stars, a crucial skill in a radar-poor environment, and I had small boat experience from growing up on the Chesapeake Bay, an unexpected asset in a global naval war. The first time I actually stepped aboard PT-164, a wave of profound disbelief washed over me. I genuinely thought the Navy had, perhaps, irrevocably lost its mind. This wasn't a warship in any sense I understood. It was a glorified speedboat, a sleek, arrogant vessel with delusions of grandeur. The hull was wood. Wood, in a war defined by the clash of steel and impenetrable armor. The living quarters, a claustrophobic maze of bunks and equipment, were so incredibly cramped that hot bunking, the practice of sharing bunks on different shifts, wasn't just common. It was an absolute, non-negotiable mandatory reality. There was virtually no armor protection, save for some flimsy sheet metal crudely bolted around the bridge, offering little more than psychological comfort. One good hit from anything larger than a rifle bullet, and we wouldn't just be damaged. We'd be instantly reduced to a scattering of matchsticks, splintered kindling floating on the vast, indifferent ocean. But then I met Mac, Lieutenant Commander Arthur M. McPhersonson, and everything almost instantly changed. Mac was 28 years old, an age considered positively ancient by the standards of the youthful, daredevil PT boat crews. His eyes, however, told a different story. They had already witnessed far too much, seen horrors that etched themselves into a man's soul. He had been at Pearl Harbor, aboard the destroyer USS Shaw, when the Japanese unleashed their devastating surprise attack. He had fought with grim determination at Midway, a turning point in the Pacific War. He volunteered for PT boats, not out of a thirst for glory, but out of a profound, weariness-born conviction. In his own understated, resolute words, "I'm tired of being a target. Time to become the hunter." Mac, with a preternatural grasp of the unconventional, understood something that would take the rest of us weeks, even months, of brutal, blood-soaked experience to learn. PT boats were not designed to fight like conventional warships. We were not meant for symmetric engagements, for grand cannon duels or meticulously planned fleet actions. No, we were maritime guerrillas, seagoing assassins who struck with lightning speed and savage precision from cunning ambushes, vanishing back into the protective embrace of the darkness before the bewildered enemy could even begin to react. We were, in essence, the ultimate asymmetrical weapon. Our crew, a motley collection of misfits and specialists, was a testament to the Navy's desperate need for unorthodox talent. These were men who would likely never have served together on a regular Navy vessel, a testament to the melting pot nature of the PT boat service. Dutch Vanderberg, our executive officer, was a brilliant Yale mathematics professor who possessed the uncanny ability to calculate complex torpedo-firing solutions in his head faster than most men could even manipulate a slide rule. His intellectual prowess was a vital asset, a precise counterpoint to the raw, visceral chaos of combat. Chief Motor Machinist's mate, Carlos Charlie Mendoza, a pre-war legend in the racing circuit, had been building high-performance engines in Los Angeles. He possessed an almost magical touch, capable of making our temperamental Packard engines purr like contented kittens or roar like enraged lions, depending entirely on the immediate, desperate needs of the moment. Radio Man Second Class. William Sparks Patterson, a veteran of the submarine service, had learned the critical art of operating radios in absolute, profound silence, a skill that proved invaluable in maintaining our stealth. Our torpedo man's mate, First Class, Patrick Paddy O'Brien, was an artist, a true virtuoso with those mechanical fish we called torpedoes. Each Mark 13 torpedo, a marvel of engineering and destruction, weighed a staggering 2,200 pounds and, at the time, cost as much as a new house back home. Paddy treated them with a reverence that bordered on the religious, better than most men treated their wives, constantly adjusting, meticulously cleaning, and even, it seemed, sweet-talking them. These beauties, he'd declare, his voice a low rumble as he polished the gleaming bronze propellers with an almost tender care, are the only reason the Japs will take us seriously. One shot, one kill, or we're just expensive target practice. His words, grim and uncompromising, resonated with the brutal realities of our mission. The rest of our 12-man crew was equally diverse and essential. We had 2 more gunners, an engineer, a cook, who, by necessity, doubled as a medic, and 3 seamen who, with tireless dedication, handled every other conceivable task. We were black and white, city boys and farm kids, high school dropouts and college graduates, united by one profound, simple, and terrifying fact. We were all volunteers. We had all signed up knowing with a chilling certainty that we probably wouldn't survive the war. This shared, unspoken understanding forged an unbreakable bond, a brotherhood unlike any other. Training at Melville was not just rigorous, it was brutal, unforgiving, and deliberately designed to strip away any preconceived notions of conventional warfare. The Navy, having learned harsh, bloody lessons from early PT boat losses, understood that raw enthusiasm alone was simply not enough. We needed to be faster, smarter, and, yes, more vicious than anything the Imperial Japanese Navy could possibly throw at us. We practiced high-speed attacks relentlessly, until we could launch torpedoes with astonishing accuracy while bouncing across waves at a bone-jarring 40 knots, a testament to the boat's design and the crew's developing skill. We learned to navigate not just by charts, but by sound and raw instinct, relying on the subtle shifts of the wind and the smell of the sea when sudden, violent tropical squalls reduced visibility to an absolute, impenetrable zero. Most importantly, we learned to fundamentally alter our mindset, to think like cunning pirates, masters of deception and ambush, rather than rigid, conventional sailors. Our training program was spearheaded by Commander James Wild Jim Patterson, a legend in his own right. He had not only survived the brutal Philippines campaign, but had also managed a daring escape from Corregidor on one of the very last PT boats to slip out before the island fell. His training philosophy was disarmingly simple, yet profoundly revolutionary. The Japanese expect you to fight fair. Don't. They expect you to follow naval tradition. Don't. They expect you to be afraid of the dark. Make them afraid instead. He taught us that our greatest weapons weren't just our powerful torpedoes or rapid-firing machine guns, but something far more intangible: surprise, blistering speed, and sheer audacious courage. These were the elements that would tip the scales in our favor against overwhelming odds. We arrived at our forward base at Rendova on June 30th, 1943. A date that coincided precisely with the beginning of the grueling, bloody invasion of New Georgia. Our base was a stark testament to the improvised raw nature of jungle warfare. It was little more than a hastily established fuel dump, a cluster of camouflaged Quonset huts sweltering under the oppressive sun, and a rough-hewn dock, expertly hidden from aerial reconnaissance beneath a thick canopy of swaying palm fronds. The first thing that assaulted our senses upon arrival was the smell. A potent, unforgettable cocktail of rotting vegetation, the pungent odor of diesel fuel, and the cloyingly sweet stench of tropical decay, the unmistakable aroma of a land being consumed by both nature and war. The second thing that permeated the air was the incessant, distant rumble of artillery fire from New Georgia, a grim, constant reminder that, just a few miles away, American Marines were dying, making supreme sacrifices in their desperate, bloody effort to seize the vital Munda airfield. Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 9, our unit, comprised a modest but deadly force of 12 PT boats. Our primary mission was deceptively simple on paper: interdict any and all Japanese reinforcement attempts in the strategic Central Solomons. Our orders were to patrol the treacherous, reef-infested waters between the major Japanese bases and sink anything that dared to fly the rising sun flag. The reality, however, was infinitely more complex, far more dangerous. These waters were not open ocean, but a bewildering, deadly maze of razor-sharp coral reefs, towering volcanic islands shrouded in dense jungle, and hidden Japanese strongpoints, often bristling with concealed shore batteries. The enemy possessed seaplanes for ubiquitous aerial reconnaissance, a network of highly effective coast watchers strategically positioned on every major island, and dedicated destroyer squadrons specifically trained and equipped to hunt down and annihilate PT boats. The odds were, to put it mildly, stacked against us. Our very first patrol, on July 5th, was a chilling, catastrophic disaster. 3 boats, including our own PT-164, attempted to intercept a Japanese convoy near Visu. Before we could even maneuver into an effective attack position, before we could truly unleash our stealth and speed, we were spotted. Not by a surface vessel, but by an enemy float plane, a lumbering sentinel of the sky. Suddenly, with an alarming swiftness, 4 destroyers were bearing down on us, their searchlights blazing with malevolent intent, their guns spewing fire and death. We scattered like panicked rabbits, racing pell-mell through a terrifying gauntlet of shell splashes, the ocean erupting around us in geysers of white foam and black water. PT-158, a sister boat, took a direct hit from a 5-inch shell. The impact was instant, horrific. She simply disintegrated, exploding into a million fragments of wood and steel. 12 men, our comrades, were gone in an instant, vaporized along with their boat, leaving nothing but a lingering scent of cordite and a widening slick on the water. We spent 4 agonizing hours dodging through the labyrinthine reefs and islands before finally, miraculously, escaping the relentless pursuit. No torpedoes fired, no enemy ships damaged, and we had lost a boat and its entire crew. That night, huddled in the oppressive, humid gloom of our makeshift base at Rendova, Mac gathered us together. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of the day's brutal lesson. "We learned something important today," he said, his eyes scanning our weary, shell-shocked faces. "We can't fight them like destroyers fight each other. We're not built for gun duels. We strike from ambush, or we don't strike at all." It was a hard lesson, etched in blood and the lives of our fallen comrades, but it would indelibly shape every single mission that followed, fundamentally altering our approach to combat. Over the ensuing 2 weeks, through a relentless, often agonizing process of trial and error, we developed and refined a whole new lexicon of tactics, a guerrilla manual for the seas. We learned to exploit the natural radar shadows cast by the volcanic islands, using them as cloaks to mask our approach, transforming geographical features into strategic advantages. We discovered that by shutting down 2 of our 3 powerful Packard engines and running silently on just one, we could dramatically reduce our acoustic signature, turning our high-speed leviathans into barely audible whispers on the water. Most importantly, we painstakingly figured out how to coordinate complex attacks between multiple boats, not through vulnerable radio transmissions, but using simple, prearranged light signals that the Japanese, with all their sophisticated training, couldn't intercept or decipher. This was a true breakthrough, turning our scattered forces into a cohesive, deadly strike team. Our operations were further bolstered by an intelligence network that, in retrospect, was nothing short of remarkable. Australian coast watchers, unsung heroes often hiding for months in the dense Japanese-occupied jungle hills of the Solomons, would radio vital enemy ship movements, risking unimaginable torture and execution if discovered. Native Solomon Islanders, with an intimate knowledge of their waters and a deep-seated resentment of their Japanese occupiers, risked their lives daily, paddling their fragile canoes out to meet us under the cover of darkness, bringing crucial, whispered information about Japanese positions and intentions. Sometimes we'd even receive highly classified decrypt intelligence from Pearl Harbor, providing us with exact convoy schedules, a veritable golden ticket in our deadly game of cat and mouse. But most of the time, stripped of these luxuries, we hunted by raw instinct, by honed experience, and by the sheer, unshakable will to find and destroy the enemy. In July 1943, the PT boats were still officially classified as secret weapons. Official Navy communications, wary of revealing our capabilities, never mentioned us by name, referring only to small craft, or, in a nod to our agile, elusive nature, mosquito boats. The Japanese, bewildered by the sudden devastating attacks on their convoys, knew something was hitting them. But their initial, often frantic reports described us as everything from submarines to floating mines. They simply could not, would not, believe that the Americans would send flimsy wooden speedboats, these seemingly insignificant craft, against their formidable steel warships. That profound ignorance, that fundamental failure of imagination on their part, was our single greatest advantage. A psychological shield that bought us precious time and surprise. Then came the night of July 18th. A tense, whispered report from our network of coast watchers confirmed what we had been waiting for, what we had been training for. A major Japanese reinforcement convoy was slated to run through Blackett Strait, a narrow, treacherous passage, heading directly for Vila on Kolombangara. This was it. This was the target that encapsulated everything we had learned, everything we had sacrificed for. Multiple transports carrying thousands of enemy soldiers with minimal escort, forced by the geography into narrow waters where their numerical and conventional firepower superiority would be negated. This was our moment. Mac, with a calm resolve that masked the immense pressure, volunteered our boat, PT-164, to lead the charge. We would be joined by PT-168, skippered by the equally daring Lieutenant Henry Hank Bramwell, and PT-171, under the command of Lieutenant Junior Grade Joseph Joey Antonelli. The briefing that evening was an exercise in palpable tension, the air thick with unspoken fears and grim determination. Intelligence estimated a force of 3 large transports, escorted by 1 or 2 destroyers, carrying elements of the Japanese 13th Regiment. These were not mere construction battalions or supply troops. These were elite, battle-hardened soldiers, veterans of brutal campaigns in China and the Philippines. These were frontline warriors who, if they reached Kolombangara, would undoubtedly make the lives of our Marines a living hell on New Georgia. Commander William Bill Specht, our squadron leader, a man whose gaze was as sharp as his resolve, made the mission parameters unequivocally clear. Gentlemen, this convoy cannot reach Vila. I don't care if you have to ram those transports. They go to the bottom tonight. His words, devoid of sentimentality, echoed the brutal finality of our task. As the sun began its descent on July 19th, painting the vast Solomon's sky in hues of violent, blood red, we made our final, meticulous preparations. Paddy O'Brien, ever the perfectionist, ran through his torpedo checklist for the 5th time, his hands moving with practiced grace. He set the Mark 13s for a depth of 10 feet and a speed of 28 knots. Optimal settings, he calculated, for hitting a heavily loaded transport. Charlie Mendoza had our magnificent Packard engines tuned to an almost ethereal perfection, their powerful rumble muffled by expertly installed exhaust baffles designed to reduce our noise signature to a minimum. Dutch Vanderberg, his brow furrowed in intense concentration, plotted and replotted our attack approach, meticulously factoring in every variable: treacherous currents, the capricious wind, and the precise position of the moon in the night sky. I, in turn, checked my machine guns one last time, feeling the smooth, satisfying click of the ammunition belts feeding flawlessly. We had loaded nothing but armor-piercing and incendiary rounds. Regular ball ammunition was largely useless against the hardened steel of Japanese ships, but API rounds could punch through bridge windows, ignite devastating fires, and, crucially, suppress enemy gun crews. Every 5th round was a tracer, transforming the dark night sky into an eerie, deadly fireworks display, a visual representation of our unleashed fury. At 20-30 hours, with the last vestiges of daylight fading into an oppressive tropical black, we slipped our moorings, easing silently away from the makeshift dock and melting into the gathering darkness. The 3 boats moved in a tight column formation, our powerful engines muffled to a low, barely perceptible rumble. As we cleared Rendova Harbor, Mac gave the order: test weapons. The night briefly erupted in a thunderous cacophony of gunfire as 12 50-caliber machine guns and 3 20mm cannons barked defiantly into the empty sea, their fiery muzzles spitting tracers that arced beautifully into the void. Then, just as suddenly, silence descended once more, broken only by the rhythmic, throbbing pulse of our engines and the soft, insistent hiss of water rushing along our hulls. The ocean, we quickly observed, was rougher than we had hoped, with a 2-foot chop that would undoubtedly make torpedo accuracy a challenging, precarious endeavor. But in the cruel calculus of combat, it also offered a silver lining. Our wakes, those telltale trails of disturbed water, would be harder for enemy lookouts to spot, and the wave action would help mask the subtle, persistent hum of our engines. Every single advantage, no matter how small, mattered when you were an 80-foot sliver of plywood daring to attack a 400-foot behemoth of steel. By 23 hours, we reached our designated ambush position, nestled discreetly off the north coast of Vela La Vela. Mac, with an almost agonizing patience, cut our engines to a complete idle, and we drifted in the oppressive darkness, a silent, unseen menace waiting. The only sounds now were the gentle, rhythmic lapping of water against our hull and the distant, almost comforting rumble of artillery from New Georgia, a grim counterpoint to our own silent hunt. Then, at precisely 23:47 hours, Sparks Patterson, our radio man, picked up a crackling, urgent transmission from a coast watcher. 3 large ships, 2 escorts bearing 280, speed 18 knots, range 15 miles from your position. The hunt, after hours of nerve-wracking anticipation, was finally, decisively, on. Mac, his face illuminated by the faint glow of the compass, started 2 of our powerful engines, keeping them at a low, almost reluctant throttle as we began to move, ever so slowly, to intercept. The mathematics of the encounter were simple in their elegance, yet utterly crucial in their execution. The enemy convoy, a predictable, vulnerable target, was making a steady 18 knots on a fixed course. We, with our lightweight hulls and roaring Packards, could achieve 35 knots without creating an overly conspicuous wake. If we positioned ourselves with absolute precision, we would intercept them just as they entered the narrowest, most confining part of Blackett Strait, a geographical choke point where their superior numbers and maneuverability would be rendered utterly useless. This was the trap. At 00:18 hours on July 20th, Dutch, our hawk-eyed executive officer, spotted them through his binoculars, dark, ominous shapes against the dazzling, star-strewn canvas of the night sky, exactly where they should be. The Japanese were maintaining perfect formation, a testament to their rigorous training, but also a predictable pattern we could exploit. 2 destroyers, sleek and deadly, led the way, their silhouettes cutting sharp lines against the horizon. 3 transports, massive and lumbering, followed in their wake, with another destroyer bringing up the rear, a vigilant sentinel. They showed no lights, maintaining strict blackout discipline, but their sheer size and the rhythmic, regular spacing between them made them eerily easy to track once you knew precisely where to look, once your eyes adapted to the profound darkness. Mac's plan was elegantly simple, yet incredibly audacious, a testament to his bold, unconventional thinking. PT-168, commanded by Hank Bramwell, would attack from the port side of the convoy, launching its devastating payload into the exposed flank. PT-171, under Joey Antonelli, would unleash its fury from starboard. And, We, PT-164, with Mac at the helm, would go straight up the middle, a daring, almost suicidal charge directly after the Leda transport. This meant passing directly between the escort destroyers, literally threading the needle between death on either side, a terrifying gamble of speed and precision. But if it worked, if we could pull off this impossible feat, we would sow maximum confusion, shattering their orderly formation, and have clear, unobstructed shots at all three vulnerable transports. "All ahead slow," Mac whispered, his voice barely audible above the gentle lapping of the water. We crept forward at a sluggish 5 knots, barely moving, letting the unsuspecting convoy come inexorably closer to us, like prey walking into a snare. At 2,000 yards, the deep, throbbing hum of their massive diesels, pushing thousands of tons of steel through the water, became distinctly audible, a growing pulse in the night. At 1,500 yards, individual details began to resolve themselves in the gloom. The distinctive pagoda-style bridge of the lead destroyer, the cargo booms bristling on the transports, even fleeting glimpses of figures moving on their decks. Then, at a heart-stopping 1,000 yards, Mac gave the signal. 3 rapid, distinct clicks on the radio, a silent command that unleashed hell. And all 3 PT boats surged forward simultaneously. Our engines, those mighty Packards, roared from idle to full throttle in mere seconds, an explosive symphony of unleashed power. Our bows lifted defiantly out of the water as we accelerated with terrifying speed, rapidly reaching our blistering attack velocity. The profound silence of the night shattered, ripped apart by the scream of engines and the churning of water as we raced toward the unsuspecting enemy convoy at a dizzying 40 knots. 3 small craft, 80 feet of plywood, challenging giants of steel. The Japanese were caught completely, utterly off guard. Their lookouts, meticulously trained to spot the subtle periscope of a submarine or the distant silhouette of an approaching destroyer, never in their wildest dreams expected attackers moving with such suicidal speed from such impossibly close range. We were inside their formation, an unwelcome, deadly intrusion, before they could even begin to react, racing between the escort destroyers at point-blank range. I opened fire with my twin, 50s, a relentless stream of tracers raking the bridge of the nearest destroyer, watching with grim satisfaction as my rounds punched through windows, sending showers of sparks flying as they ricocheted off hardened steel. "Fire 1, fire 2. Paddy's voice, calm amidst the chaos, cut through the din. He launched our first 2 Mark 13 torpedoes at a mere 600 yards, an impossibly close range where missing was almost a statistical impossibility. The mechanical fish, silent and deadly, leaped from their tubes and splashed into the water, their propellers already spinning at full speed, leaving twin wakes of phosphorescent bubbles stretching behind them like spectral fingers of death. Those torpedoes were aimed at the lead transport, the Kitakami Maru, a converted passenger liner, now carrying over 3,000 Japanese soldiers, their fate sealed by those twin wakes. The destroyer to our starboard, finally shaking off its initial shock, reacted with a vengeance, swinging its powerful searchlight toward us. The brilliant white beam found us instantly, blinding in its intensity, a harsh spotlight on our fragile wooden hull. Immediately, their 25mm anti-aircraft guns, designed to shred attacking planes, opened fire. Green tracers reaching out for us like deadly, grasping fingers. Shells splashed all around us, so agonizingly close that stinging spray soaked everyone on deck, tasting of salt and cordite. Then our torpedoes hit. The first struck the lead transport just abaft the bridge with a thunderous concussive explosion that ripped through the night like a flash of man-made lightning, momentarily illuminating the horror. The second hit amidships, a brutal blow that instantly broke the ship's back. A loud, tearing sound of twisting metal and splintering wood. The 8,000-ton vessel, laden with human cargo, lifted partially out of the water. An agonizing gasp for life. Then split cleanly in half, both sections immediately beginning their inexorable descent into the black, suffocating depths. Through the blinding searchlight glare and the deafening cacophony of gunfire, we could discern hundreds of Japanese soldiers spilling into the churning, oil-slicked water, their terrified screams piercing even the roar of our engines. A chilling testament to the scale of our devastation. PT-168 struck next, Hank Bramwell's boat delivering its own devastating payload. Both of its Mark 13 torpedoes slammed into the second transport, a ship rumored to be loaded with ammunition and fuel for the Vila garrison. The effect was cataclysmic. The vessel exploded like a volcano, a monumental, blinding inferno that dwarfed our previous hits. The blast was so powerful, so immense, that it actually knocked me off my feet, sending me sprawling on the deck. A wave of superheated air, thick with the smell of burning fuel and human despair, washed over our boat, momentarily engulfing us. Flaming debris, incandescent shards of the exploded ship, rained down around us, starting small, desperate fires on our wooden deck that we frantically stomped out, a desperate dance against immediate incineration. The Japanese destroyers, their initial shock giving way to furious retaliation, were now fully engaged, but they faced an impossible, agonizing problem. We were simply too close for their main guns, powerful 5-inch weapons, to depress low enough to hit us. More critically, we were inextricably mixed in with their own remaining transports, making it lethally dangerous for them to fire without risking friendly fire. Their desperate solution: attempt to ram us, to use their sheer superior size and tonnage to simply run us down, to crush our fragile wooden boat beneath their steel bows. The nearest destroyer, a dark, menacing shape, turned hard toward us, its knife-sharp bow aimed directly at our beam, a horrifying, accelerating threat. At our combined closure speed, we had, perhaps, 10 seconds, a mere blink of an eye, before inevitable impact, before utter annihilation. Mac, with an instinctive, split-second decision that saved all our lives, threw the wheel hard right and pushed the throttles past their stops, forcing our engines beyond their normal limits. Our Packards screamed in protest, a banshee wail of tortured machinery, but PT-164 pivoted like a ballet dancer, a graceful, improbable maneuver that defied the laws of physics. We missed the destroyer's bow by less than 10 feet, a distance so infinitesimally small it felt like a miracle. As we flashed past, I emptied a full belt of ammunition into their bridge at point-blank range, seeing sparks fly as my bullets struck home, adding to their confusion and chaos. PT-171, Joey Antonelli's boat, wasn't as fortunate. Joey had lined up perfect shots on the third transport, a textbook attack run. But a Japanese destroyer, its searchlights now sweeping with murderous intent, caught them in its brilliant glare before they could fire. The enemy's 25mm cannons found their mark, stitching a devastating line of holes across PT-171's bow. One shell, A terrifying near miss hit a torpedo directly, but miraculously it didn't detonate. The warhead, in a twist of fate, needed to be armed by spinning in the water before it would explode. Still, Joey had no choice but to abort his attack run and flee, his boat streaming smoke and taking on water, a desperate retreat from the jaws of death. We came around for another pass, our engines still screaming, but the critical element of surprise, our most potent weapon, was irrevocably gone. Every searchlight in the Japanese convoy was now sweeping the water with frantic, desperate energy, and guns of every caliber, from small arms to formidable 5-inchers, were firing in all directions. A chaotic, murderous barrage. The water around us was torn by so many shell splashes it looked like a violent rainstorm. Geysers erupting in every direction. Worse, far worse, the Japanese had finally managed to depress their 5-inch guns, and a single direct hit from one of those could blow us to splinters, could obliterate our wooden boat in an instant. "Launch remaining fish and get us out of here," Mac roared over the hellish din, his voice strained but resolute. Patty, unflappable as ever, fired our last 2 Mark 13 torpedoes at the remaining transport, a desperate, final gamble. But the ship's captain, now acutely aware of the danger, saw them coming. With a desperate, skillful maneuver, he managed to comb the wakes, turning his ship parallel to the torpedoes, allowing both mechanical fish to pass harmlessly along his sides. Our last chance to sink the third transport was gone. Then we were running, all 3 of our powerful engines at maximum power, weaving a desperate, high-speed dance between the geysers of shell splashes as we fled into the relative sanctuary of the darkness, our mission partially accomplished, our lives still hanging by a thread. Behind us, the furious battle continued to rage, a chaotic symphony of explosions and gunfire. PT-168, despite taking several hits, those brutal impacts rattling her wooden hull, managed to put one more torpedo into the already crippled, agonizingly sinking second transport, the ammunition ship. The vessel's death throes were spectacular, illuminating the entire strait with a blinding, apocalyptic brilliance. Secondary explosions rippling through her hull as she went down. A final, defiant roar. 2 of the 3 transports, laden with their human cargo, were gone, taking nearly 6,000 Japanese soldiers with them, their journey to reinforce Kolombangara brutally curtailed. The third transport and the escorting destroyers, though physically undamaged, were thoroughly shaken, their confidence in their nocturnal dominance shattered. We regrouped 5 miles south of the engagement area, a cautious, silent rendezvous in the lingering darkness. All 3 boats, battered and scarred but still miraculously afloat, limped towards each other. PT-171, Joey's boat, was in the worst shape, with multiple holes just at the waterline, perilously close to sinking, and one of her precious engines dead. We came alongside, our crews working with desperate urgency to transfer wounded crew members, their cries echoing softly in the night, while our carpenter's mates, resourceful beyond measure, worked frantically to plug the gaping holes with anything they could lay their hands on: mattresses, life jackets, even chunks of timber, a desperate race against the encroaching sea. PT-168 had lost her radio antenna, a vital piece of equipment, and had taken extensive shrapnel damage throughout her superstructure. But, remarkably, she remained combat-capable. Our boat, PT-164, had somehow, miraculously, escaped with minimal damage. A few shrapnel holes, a burned-out gun barrel from overheating during the intense firefight, and some scorch marks from agonizingly near misses. But we were alive. And we had, against all odds, accomplished our mission. 2 transports definitively sunk, thousands of enemy soldiers killed, their offensive capabilities crippled. The Japanese reinforcement schedule, a meticulous timetable designed to crush our forces, had been brutally, undeniably disrupted. The surviving transport, its mission aborted, rather than continuing to Vila, had reversed a course and fled back to Rabaul, its tail between its legs, a clear victory for our mosquito boats. The journey back to base was fraught with tension, a protracted, nerve-wracking ordeal. We knew, with chilling certainty, that Japanese float planes would be up at first light, relentlessly searching for us, hunting for any sign of our return. We hid, our battered boats tucked into the deep, concealing shadows of small, uninhabited islands, camouflaged with freshly cut palm fronds, our engines off, our crews barely breathing as the distinctive drone of enemy aircraft reverberated ominously overhead. It took us a grueling 14 hours to cover what should have been a mere 3-hour journey. But, against all odds, we all made it back to Rendova, exhausted, battered, but profoundly alive. The debriefing that followed was exhaustive, a painstaking recounting of every detail. Intelligence officers, their faces grimly serious, demanded every scrap of information. Japanese tactics, the effectiveness of their weapons, their response times, their perceived vulnerabilities. What we told them, the hard-won lessons of that brutal night, would be meticulously compiled and distributed to every PT squadron operating across the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Pacific. The insights gained from our engagement, paid for in blood and terrifying risk, would undoubtedly save countless American lives and sink innumerable enemy ships throughout the remaining war years. But the immediate impact, the psychological ripple effect, was perhaps even more significant than the tactical success. Radio intercepts, deciphered with painstaking effort, revealed a fascinating, telling shift in Japanese communications. They described new American secret weapons, high-speed torpedo boats appearing from seemingly nowhere, striking with devastating force, and vanishing into the night. For the very first time, the vaunted Imperial Japanese Navy, masters of the Pacific night, was afraid of the dark. They could no longer move freely, no longer command the night with impunity, no longer guarantee safe passage even to their most heavily guarded convoys. Every shadow, every ripple on the water, might now conceal a PT boat. Every distant sound, every whisper of the wind, might be American engines approaching, their powerful Packards cutting through the blackness. Over the following weeks, the Japanese, reacting to this terrifying new threat, dramatically changed their entire resupply strategy. Convoys, once frequent and audacious, became larger but significantly less frequent, a logistical strain. Destroyer escorts, once deemed sufficient, doubled, then tripled, stretching their precious resources thin. They even began deploying searchlight-equipped float planes for night reconnaissance, desperately trying to pierce the darkness that had once been their ally. All of these profound changes meant fewer supplies and fewer crucial reinforcements reaching their beleaguered island garrisons, slowly but inexorably giving our ground forces crucial, hard-won advantages in the brutal jungle fighting. The psychological impact of the Mosquito Boat Terror was, arguably, even greater than the tactical success itself. Japanese soldiers, waiting for reinforcements that never came, began to lose hope, their morale corroding under the relentless pressure. Enemy commanders, unable to guarantee supply deliveries, were forced to cancel offensive operations, their plans for conquest slowly grinding to a halt. The myth of Japanese invincibility at night, a deeply ingrained belief that had dominated the Pacific since Pearl Harbor, shattered by small wooden boats crewed by American teenagers and reservists, began to crumble throughout the entire Pacific theater. It was a profound strategic victory, achieved not just through firepower, but through sheer audacity and psychological warfare. Our squadron's success, reverberating through the highest echelons of the Navy, led to a rapid, extensive expansion of the PT boat program. New bases, hastily constructed but strategically vital, were established throughout the Solomon Islands and New Guinea. Improved boats, incorporating hard-won combat experience, featuring better engines, more advanced radar systems, and even some limited armor protection, were rushed into production. The tactics we had developed through arduous trial and error, often at great cost, became official doctrine, meticulously taught at training bases stretching from Rhode Island to California. But this profound success came at a steep, often unbearable cost. It was measured in the lives of friends who simply didn't come home, whose names were forever etched into the cold, unforgiving stone of war memorials. Just 2 weeks after our triumphant attack off Vela La Vela, PT-166 struck a mine while returning from patrol. All hands were lost, vanishing into the abyss. PT-162 was caught by Japanese destroyers in broad daylight when a catastrophic engine failure left her dead in the water, a helpless target. They shot her to pieces, a brutal, merciless execution. Only 3 survivors were pulled from the churning wreckage. Joey Antonelli, the daring skipper of PT-171, the boat that had fought so bravely, was tragically killed by a sniper while his boat was refueling at a forward base, a cruel irony of fate. By October 1943, when I was rotated back to the States for new construction training, our squadron, a small but fiercely effective unit, had lost 7 boats and 73 brave men. Yet, in that same brutal calculus, we had sunk or severely damaged over 40 Japanese vessels, ranging from powerful destroyers to vital barges, and killed thousands of enemy soldiers who never reached their intended destinations, their offensive capabilities forever neutralized. The exchange rate was brutal, a grim equation of life and death, but it was, in the cold, hard logic of total war, a necessary one. Every PT boat we lost, while deeply mourned, was ultimately replaceable. The Japanese ships and, more critically, their experienced crews, hardened by years of war, were not. I returned to the Pacific in March 1944, this time as the executive officer of PT 321, operating in the treacherous waters of the Philippines. The boats, by then, were undeniably better. They were equipped with more reliable radar, armor plating strategically placed around the cockpit for improved crew protection, and more dependable torpedoes, refined through countless combat lessons. But the essence, the heart and soul of the PT boat, remained unchanged. It was still about blistering speed, overwhelming surprise, and unshakable audacity. We were still proving, with every daring mission, that American innovation, coupled with indomitable courage, could overcome any enemy advantage, no matter how formidable it seemed. The Japanese, despite their formidable naval intelligence and their legendary adaptability, never fully adapted to the pervasive, elusive threat posed by the PT boats. They tried everything: specialized hunter-killer groups, destroyers equipped with their own rapidly improving radar, even desperate, suicidal boats designed to ram us. But they simply couldn't be everywhere at once. They couldn't protect every convoy, couldn't make the night safe again for their precious logistics. The secret weapon they had discovered too late, this Mosquito fleet that they had initially dismissed, had permanently, irrevocably altered the balance of power in the Pacific. Mac McPhersonson, our fearless skipper, survived the war, a testament to his skill and luck, earning a Navy Cross and 2 Silver Stars for his valor. He remained in the Navy, a career officer, eventually commanding a destroyer squadron in the Korean War. We kept in touch, our bond forged in the crucible of combat, until his death in 1987. At his funeral, his son told me, with a quiet reverence, that Mac often remarked that the PT boats were where he truly learned what real courage meant. Not the naive absence of fear, but decisive, resolute action despite the gnawing, paralyzing presence of terror. A lesson for all of us, then and now. Dutch Vanderberg, our brilliant executive officer, returned to Yale after the war. But he never forgot his invaluable navigation lessons, learned dodging Japanese destroyers in the pitch-black Solomons. He became one of America's leading oceanographers, applying the same precision and acute observation skills once honed to avoid enemy warships at 40 knots in the dark, to map the intricate dance of ocean currents and the hidden topography of underwater mountains. He once confided in me, with a wry smile, that after threading his way between enemy warships at 40 knots in the dark, everything else in life, every challenge, every obstacle, seemed remarkably, almost comically, easy by comparison. Charlie Mendoza, our wizard with engines, went back to building racing engines in Los Angeles, applying the ingenious tricks he'd learned keeping temperamental Packard engines running in the harshest combat conditions to make cars go even faster. His garage became a legendary haunt among hot rodders, adorned with a simple, proud sign that read, "Speed Shop." We made PT boats fly. He'd tell his awe-struck customers that if he could make 45,000 horsepower push 50 tons at 45 knots, he could, with absolute certainty, make anything go fast. Paddy O'Brien, our torpedo artist, stayed in the Navy, rising through the ranks to become one of the service's leading torpedo experts. He authored the definitive manual on Mark 13 torpedo maintenance, a document that remained in use until the 1970s, a testament to his expertise. But he never, not once, forgot those torpedoes we fired that night off Vela La Vela. "Those were my fish that sank those transports," he'd say with a fierce, justified pride, his eyes gleaming with the memory. 2 shots, 2 hits, 6,000 Japanese who never made it to kill Americans. The PT boat story is, regrettably, often overshadowed by the monumental, larger-than-life battles of World War II. Midway, Guadalcanal, Leyte Gulf. But for those of us who served on these tiny wooden warriors, who experienced their raw power and their terrifying vulnerability, we knew with an unshakable conviction that we had been part of something truly revolutionary, something that transcended mere tactical victories. We had definitively proven that raw technology, combined with unparalleled courage and the sheer audacity of desperate men, could overcome entrenched tradition and overwhelming size. We had shown that ordinary American sailors, many of whom had never even seen the ocean before the shock of Pearl Harbor, could outfight the best navy in the world, often at their own game, in their own element. The true secret of our success wasn't really the boats themselves, marvelous as they were in their engineering and speed. It wasn't our torpedoes, though when they worked, they were undeniably, devastatingly effective. The real, enduring secret was the inherent American spirit of innovation, the unyielding willingness to try something completely, radically different when conventional methods had clearly failed. While our admirals, initially steeped in the battleship mentality, often dismissed PT boats as mere toys, junior officers and enlisted men, through sheer grit and a desperate hunger for victory, proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that toys with teeth could, and did, change the entire course of a war. Every time I read about modern naval warfare, the sleek missile boats, the futuristic stealth technology, the doctrines of asymmetric warfare, I see the unmistakable legacy, the direct lineage of those PT boats. We proved that naval combat didn't have to be about battleships slugging it out at 20,000 yards, a slow, ponderous dance of steel. It could be about lightning-fast speed and surgical stealth, about hitting where the enemy least expected and disappearing into the night before they could even formulate a response. Every fast attack craft in today's Navy, every vessel designed for quick, decisive strikes, carries the undeniable DNA from those plywood speedboats that, for a crucial period, terrorized the Imperial Japanese Navy. The Japanese phrase that entered their naval vocabulary in 1943 was chillingly simple: Mosquito Boat Terror. It was a fear that permeated their entire fleet, from the lowliest deckhand to the highest-ranking admiral. Post-war interviews with Japanese naval officers revealed a profound truth. PT boats caused disruption far beyond our actual numbers. They had to assume we were everywhere, a phantom menace. They had to plan for attacks that might never come, for threats lurking in every shadow. They had to waste precious resources defending against threats that might, in the end, be nothing more than shadows themselves. Admiral Tanaka Raizo, who commanded many of the notorious Tokyo Express runs, wrote after the war, his words tinged with a lingering respect and fear. The American PT boats were our worst nightmare. Submarines we could hunt with depth charges, aircraft we could see coming. But these devil boats appeared from nowhere, struck like cobras, and vanished into the night. They made us afraid of our own element, the darkness we had once ruled. That fear, that pervasive uncertainty we deliberately created, was, in the grand scheme of the war, worth more than any number of ships sunk. It represented the turning point when the Imperial Japanese Navy, which had dominated the Pacific since the audacious attack on Pearl Harbor, began, for the very first time, to doubt itself, to question its own invincibility. When sailors who had trained their entire lives for the brutal realities of night combat started fearing mere shadows, the psychological battle was already decisively won. The technical evolution of PT boats during the war was, in itself, remarkable. The early boats, like our PT-164, were essentially peacetime designs, rushed into harrowing combat service, often with inadequate modifications. But by 1945, at the war's twilight, PT boats were truly formidable instruments of war. They carried advanced radar systems that could peer through the darkest night and thickest fog, a terrifying advantage. They bristled with rockets, packed an even heavier punch with more advanced torpedoes, and even experimented with primitive guided missiles. But the core concept, the revolutionary idea, never changed. Small, fast, deadly, and crewed by volunteers willing to take insane, calculated risks for their country. One story that more than any other, truly captures the indomitable spirit of the PT boat crews, happened in October 1944, during the monumental Battle of Leyte Gulf. A squadron of PT boats, hopelessly outgunned, attacked the Japanese battleship Yamato, the largest warship ever built, a behemoth of steel and firepower. Their torpedoes, designed for smaller targets, couldn't even penetrate Yamato's colossal armor belt, but they attacked anyway, with a courage that bordered on the suicidal, forcing the massive battleship to take evasive action, buying crucial time for American escort carriers to escape what would have been certain destruction. The small boats didn't sink the giant that day, but their sheer, unshakable courage saved countless American lives. It was a testament to the fact that victory wasn't always measured in tonnage or firepower, but in the unwavering human spirit. The PT boat bases themselves became the stuff of legend. Rendova, Tulagi, Mayos, Woendi, exotic names that, to us, simply meant mosquitoes, debilitating malaria, and endless midnight missions. These were not the pristine, well-appointed naval bases of Pearl Harbor or San Diego, with their officers' clubs and clean sheets. No, these were muddy, disease-ridden hellholes where we lived on K-rations, endless spam, and powdered eggs, supplemented by whatever we could beg or trade from larger ships. Fresh water was a precious commodity, strictly rationed for drinking only, a constant reminder of our precarious existence. We washed in seawater, which left irritating salt crystals that chafed and burned our skin. Coffee, black and strong enough to float a wrench, was our undisputed lifeblood, the only thing that kept us going through the long, terrifying nights. Some crews, driven by desperation and a healthy dose of ingenuity, became incredibly creative, fishing with hand grenades or trading precious torpedo alcohol to base personnel for a chance at real food. A brief respite from the monotonous diet of war. Maintenance was a constant, critical, and often exhausting endeavor. The relentless salt water corroded everything it touched, turning metal to rust in a matter of weeks. The oppressive tropical heat and humidity rotted wood and fabric with alarming speed, while our high-speed operations stressed every single component of the boat to its absolute limits. We often spent more time meticulously maintaining our boats than we did fighting in them, a testament to the brutal demands of the environment and the machinery. Every man, by sheer necessity, became a mechanic, a carpenter, an electrician, and a plumber. A PT boat with engine failure in enemy waters was, quite simply, a death trap, a floating coffin. So we treated maintenance not just as a duty, but as a sacred religion, a ritual essential for our very survival. The weather in the Solomons was our constant, capricious enemy. Tropical squalls could appear from nowhere, transforming calm, placid seas into mountains of churning water in a matter of minutes. Lightning strikes, spectacular and terrifying, could fry our radios and electrical systems, leaving us blind and deaf in the vastness of the ocean. The heat and humidity were so oppressive, so stifling, that men would frequently pass out at their posts, their bodies succumbing to the relentless assault of the elements. But, in the perverse logic of war, bad weather was also, paradoxically, our friend, a natural ally. It provided perfect cover, hiding us from relentless enemy aircraft and making our small boats infinitely harder to spot among the wind-driven waves, turning nature's fury into our tactical advantage. Navigation in those treacherous waters required skills they never taught at Annapolis, skills honed by instinct and bitter experience. Charts were often woefully inaccurate, based on archaic surveys from the 1800s. Coral reefs, razor-sharp and invisible just below the surface, could appear overnight after violent storms, shifting the underwater landscape into new, deadly configurations. We learned to read the subtle changes in watercolor, to decipher the complex patterns of waves, to smell land long before seeing it, to navigate by raw instinct when our instruments inevitably failed. Every successful patrol, every harrowing journey through the dark, added precious detail to our mental maps of those deadly, unpredictable waters. The Japanese response to the PT boat threat, as we've discussed, evolved throughout the war, becoming increasingly sophisticated. They developed special shallow draft destroyers, specifically designed to hunt us in the confined, reef-strewn waters. They created coordinated search patterns, employing float planes and destroyers in tandem, a terrifying, multi-layered trap. They even tried using captured PT boats as decoys, a cunning but ultimately unsuccessful ploy. But for every countermeasure they developed, we, driven by the relentless demands of survival, developed countermeasures, always pushing the envelope of innovation. It became a deadly, high-stakes game of chess, played at 40 knots in the pitch-black darkness, with human lives as the ultimate stakes. One aspect of this unique warfare rarely discussed, but profoundly important, was the immense psychological toll. Living constantly on edge, knowing with absolute certainty that any patrol could be your last, watching friends die in horrific, instantaneous ways, it marked us all deeply and irrevocably. Some men, unable to bear the constant stress, cracked under the pressure, requesting transfers, even though it carried the unspoken stigma of being labeled cowards. Others, in a strange, terrifying adaptation, became addicted to the adrenaline, volunteering for increasingly dangerous, almost suicidal missions, seeking the ultimate rush. Most of us, however, simply endured, finding our own desperate ways to cope with a fear that never truly went away. A cold, persistent companion. The humor that developed in those cramped, volatile conditions was dark, often morbid, but utterly necessary. It was a psychological armor, a coping mechanism against the unbearable. We named our boats things like Sudden Death, Hell's Angels, and Grim Reaper, a defiant embrace of the danger that surrounded us. We painted cartoon characters on our torpedoes, a surreal juxtaposition of innocence and destruction. Donald Duck riding a torpedo was a particularly popular motif. We made up songs about sinking Japanese ships. The more gruesome and vivid, the better. It was a way to make the unbearable bearable, to laugh in the face of death, a defiant shout against the encroaching darkness. The impact of PT boats extended far beyond the confines of the Pacific Theater. When the monumental Normandy invasion was planned, PT boats were included in the operational orders, tasked with protecting the vast invasion fleet from marauding German E-boats, comparable fast attack craft. The hard-won lessons learned in the Solomon Islands, often at great cost, were meticulously applied in the Mediterranean, the treacherous English Channel, and even, incredibly, the winding rivers of Europe. American PT boat doctrine, born of desperation and ingenuity, profoundly influenced naval thinking worldwide, inspiring similar programs in dozens of navies, a testament to their revolutionary effectiveness. Looking back now, decades later, from the quiet sanctuary of my study, surrounded by faded photographs and brittle, yellowed newspaper clippings, I'm still amazed that we survived at all. We were, for the most part, just kids, thrust into a global war that killed millions, playing with incredibly deadly toys. We made mistakes, countless mistakes, that by all rights should have killed us. We took risks that, in retrospect, make me shudder, the cold hand of dread gripping my heart even now. But we also accomplished something truly remarkable, something that echoed beyond the immediate tactical victories. We took an untested concept, a ridiculed notion, and through sheer grit, blood, and unimaginable courage, we transformed it into a war-winning weapon. We proved, beyond any doubt, that American innovation, fueled by an unyielding spirit and a willingness to challenge convention, could overcome any obstacle, no matter how insurmountable it initially appeared. The legacy of PT boats lives on, vibrant and undeniable in today's Navy. Every sleek, modern fast attack craft, every specialized special operations boat, every vessel designed to strike quickly and disappear, carries the indelible DNA of those original Mosquito boats. The young, dedicated sailors who crew them today probably don't know the specific details of those terrifying nights off Vela La Vela, or the profound terror we instilled in Japanese convoys. But they are, without question, our spiritual descendants, carrying on the proud tradition of speed, surprise, and unshakable audacity. When people ask me if I'm proud of my service, my mind instantly transports me back to that night of July 20th, 1943. I tell them about how 3 small wooden boats, against all odds, attacked a major enemy convoy, and, in a furious, chaotic ballet of destruction, sent thousands of Japanese soldiers to the bottom of the sea. We emerged from the darkness, just as our purpose dictated, and disappeared back into it before the bewildered enemy could even begin to respond. We were America's secret weapon, and we changed the fundamental course of the Pacific War. The Japanese were stunned, not just by the raw, audacious power of our boats, but by what they represented: the underlying American willingness to innovate, to take terrifying risks, to challenge every piece of conventional wisdom. They had meticulously studied our Navy for decades, knew our battleships and our aircraft carriers, understood our traditions and our tactics, but they never, not in their wildest strategic imaginings, conceived that we would send wooden speedboats, armed with a handful of torpedoes, to challenge their mighty steel warships. That profound failure of imagination, that inability to think beyond conventional paradigms, cost them dearly, ultimately contributing to their defeat. In the end, the story of PT boats is a uniquely American story. We took a British concept, infused it with American ingenuity, powered it with Packard engines originally designed for aircraft, armed it with torpedoes initially designed for destroyers, and crewed it with a diverse collection of civilians who, for the most part, had never even seen the ocean before the shock of Pearl Harbor. It shouldn't have worked. By all conventional logic, it was an impossible, foolhardy endeavor, but it did work. And it worked because we, the men who sailed those boats, made it work, through sheer, unyielding determination, unparalleled courage, and a boundless, audacious spirit of innovation. The last operational PT boat was finally retired in 1959, replaced by newer, faster, more capable vessels, a natural evolution of military technology. But for those of us who served on them in World War II, those of us who stared death in the face from their wooden decks, they will always be more than just boats. They will always be the boats that, in their own unique, spectacular way, helped win the war in the Pacific. We proved that size doesn't determine victory, that courage matters infinitely more than armor plating, and that American sailors, in their seemingly fragile wooden boats, could defeat anyone, anywhere, any time, against any odds. As I finish this account, sitting here in my study, surrounded by these faded photographs and yellowed newspaper clippings, I can still, in my mind's ear, hear those powerful Packard engines roaring in the night, a symphony of power and purpose. I can still feel the cold, stinging spray of Solomon seawater on my face, a visceral memory of those harrowing nights. I can still smell the acrid cordite and the pungent diesel fumes, the unmistakable aroma of combat. But most of all, I can still feel the profound pride of being part of something revolutionary, something that fundamentally changed naval warfare forever. We were boys who became men in those wooden boats, fighting a war we didn't start, but one we were utterly determined to finish. We attacked from darkness because that's where we were strongest, where our blistering speed and the sheer shock of surprise gave us the crucial, decisive advantage. The Japanese, who had once owned the darkness, learned to fear it. They learned, to their ultimate undoing, that American ingenuity, driven by a desperate necessity, could turn any perceived disadvantage into an overwhelming advantage. That, ultimately, is the enduring legacy of PT boats, not just the ships we sank or the battles we won, but the profound, undeniable proof that free people, fighting for their freedom with courage and innovation, can overcome any tyranny, any oppressive force, no matter how formidable. We were small, fast, and deadly. We were secret weapons that stayed secret just long enough to turn the tide of a vast, global conflict. We were the Mosquito fleet that brought down an empire, one torpedo, one impossible mission at a time. The Japanese were stunned by America's secret PT boats because they represented everything the Imperial Navy hadn't expected from Americans. Innovative thinking, aggressive, unconventional tactics, and the audacious willingness to risk everything on an unproven concept. By the time they understood the true, terrifying threat we posed, by the time they adapted, it was already too late. The shadows they had once ruled, the darkness they had once commanded, now belonged to us, and from those shadows we struck without mercy, relentlessly, until the rising sun finally, irrevocably, set on Japan's vast, brutal Pacific Empire.